Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our second webinar in this two-day webinar blitz. This webinar on voting systems capability and ranked choice voting will begin shortly. My name is Beverly York, and I'm a member of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center consulting team, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First, a few housekeeping matters. Participants have been muted for this webinar to reduce audio interference since we have a large number of attendees. If you have technical issues, please use the question option to send a message to the organizer so that we may try to assist. To expand or minimize the control panel, click the orange arrow of your webinar taskbar. If you have a question or comment regarding the webinar, please type that message in the question box. Alternatively, you may email your questions or comments to info@rankedchoicevoting.org. To keep this webinar to about 45 minutes, and out of respect for your time, there will only be a brief question and answer session at the end. Questions we're unable to address during this live session will be answered in a follow-up document, which will be emailed to attendees and also will be posted with a recording of this session on the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center website. The Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center provides a compilation of best practices and first-hand experiences from jurisdictions that have used this method of voting. The website, rankedchoicevoting.org, and the overall project serve as resources for voters, election administrators, policymakers, candidates, and others. The consulting team of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center is not advocacy-focused. Rather, we aim to provide resources that allow jurisdictions to implement ranked choice voting effectively and efficiently. With extensive elections experience and working together overseeing statewide, municipal, and district RCV elections, our team has focused on expanding the resources and information available regarding the administration of and education about this voting method. We're available to discuss whether or not ranked choice voting is an option for your jurisdiction and to assist in developing implementation, plans, processes for tabulating results, voter education, and more. Our services are free, including travel. For this webinar, we have the following presenters to share their insights and research on the capability of voting systems for ranked choice elections. Gary Bartlett heads up the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center after serving as the Executive Director of the State Board of Elections of North Carolina for 20 years. Karen Brunson-Bell's elections career spans more than 10 years, including 4 years with the State Board of Elections of North Carolina and 5 years as a county elections director. George Gilbert served as the Director of Elections for Guilford County, North Carolina for 25 years. Guilford is North Carolina's third largest county. Gary, Karen, and George administered ranked choice voting statewide in North Carolina in 2010, which was the first statewide use of RCV in the United States since the 1930s. They have also administered RCV at the district and municipal level. We'll now welcome Gary to set the stage for today's presentation on voting systems capability and ranked choice voting. Gary?
Thank you, Beverly. Even amongst the most ardent RCV supporters, There have been two matters in the past that have tempered its success. First, labor-intensive round-by-round hand-to-eye counting of ballots, and second, the time to complete the tally and certify a winner or winners. Those days, for the most, are in the past. Voting systems technology has advanced where RCV tabulation can occur either within the system or through third-party RCV tabulation software with most legacy voting equipment. In only a small number of cases, hand counting is the only option. There are some exciting changes occurring in RCV software and firmware, changes that will ultimately give way to pushing a button for immediate RCV results. We will go into more detail in this presentation, but first an overview. Currently, 2 voting equipment companies have a built-in RCV option and are EAC certified. One ranks up to 3. The other ranks up to 6, but the RCV tabulation is open-ended to have flexibility to meet a jurisdiction's requirements. Another vendor offers a module that can be added for RCV. This model offers up to 10 rankings and has a few state certifications, but not EAC certified. Most legacy voting equipment can generate and report out a cast vote record, can use a third-party RCV algorithm to tally results. Also, RCV tabulation software is being developed with plans to be tested and approved by an EAC testing lab, and copies of certification records will reside at the EAC. This RCV software is free and will only need a conversion of the jurisdiction's records. With the greater ability for today's voting systems to accommodate ranked choice voting, jurisdictions need to be forward-thinking in their RFP requirements. When issuing an RFP, a jurisdiction should include the RCV option or the capacity to add RCV to registration. The future looks bright for advancements in RCV voting systems. The VVSG committee of the EAC is considering standards for RCV and could be ready as early as 2018. Some voting equipment companies will then introduce their newest RCV products. I've provided you with a glimpse of what is presently available and what's ahead. Now let's explore the options and opportunities with some detail. With that, I turn it over to Karen Brinson, who will share more about RCV.
Thanks, Gary. In the last year, ranked choice voting has moved from use in only a limited number of jurisdictions to the possible voting method of millions of voters. This surge grew from voters in Maine approving a ballot initiative in November 2016 to use RCV to elect designated state and federal offices. Additionally, in 2017, 19 other states considered RCV proposals, and a federal bill to establish RCV for congressional elections was introduced. To meet this growing demand for RCV, the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center has been working with the voting equipment vendors to better understand their system's ability to be used in ranked choice voting elections. A handout for this webinar is a document we created entitled Implementing Ranked Choice Voting Statewide and Across Jurisdictions When Multiple Voting Systems Are Used. In addition to being a very long title, it also digs a little deeper than we will discuss today. Another handout provided is our newly released Model RCV Implementation Plan. It includes the Multiple Voting Systems document and other aspects that jurisdictions should consider when implementing this voting method. We will have a separate webinar before the end of the year on the model plan. For now, let's focus on voting system capabilities for RCV during our time today. In our audience this afternoon we have folks from all over the United States. Each audience member may have a different voting system configuration from the others. That's because our country does not have one-size-fits-all or even a uniform system. After the issues of the 2000 presidential election, the federal government did provide funds for all states to improve their voting equipment through the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA. The Election Assistance Commission, or EAC, was also formed to provide recommended standards through the Voluntary Voting Systems Guideline, or VVSG. These funds and guidelines, and apparently acronyms, each state developed their own laws and voting system certification processes and configurations. Just as states oversee elections, states also oversee voting systems. Some states have multiple voting systems manufactured by different vendors. Some use one vendor, but have different models of voting equipment. Having varying configurations creates several scenarios for implementation. These variations also mean that there's a lot of information for us to present today, since states did not purchase their voting systems all at the same time. Because states opted to use the HAVA funds at different times, some states are now purchasing brand new equipment to replace equipment bought in the early 2000s, while others are still using what was purchased during the mid to late 2000s and are a few years away from a replacement. Today's webinar focuses on voting systems and equipment, but let's first consider the question posed on the slide. Can there be ranked choice voting without voting equipment or voting systems? The answer is the same as if we asked, can there be any election without voting equipment or voting systems? The answer to either question is yes. Ranked choice voting has been a proven voting method for more than 100 years in the United States and in other countries through manual sorting and counting processes. Elections have taken place for thousands of years prior to voting equipment, especially electronic voting equipment, which is a modern-day facet of our electoral process. What we are considering when we talk about voting systems capability and RCV is not the actual voting method, rather the ability to administer RCV with automated or electronic RCV tabulation. As with all voting methods, RCV benefits from the ability of voting equipment to expedite tabulation, create more efficient processes, and include ballot marking devices for accessibility. You may have noticed we have continually used the term voting system in this presentation. It's a key concept to our webinar and supporting handouts. Let's touch on this term and another key term before we get our capability review. Voting system is an umbrella term for the hardware, firmware, and software used in elections. The voting system configuration greatly influences the ability of a jurisdiction to implement RCV beyond manual sorting and tabulation. Hardware is the voting equipment machine or machines used to cast a ballot. This could be an optical scanner in which a paper ballot is inserted, or direct recording electronic units, also known as DREs, which capture voter selections made on a touchscreen and record a ballot. Firmware is installed in voting equipment to make the machines compatible with the software. And the software of a voting system is used to design and tabulate ballots. On the front end, software is used for programming and coding. Media, such as a thumb drive or flash drive, is burned with the software programming and secured in the voting equipment. Data from these devices is then read back into the software once voting ends. Then the software is used to aggregate the data from the voting machines and tabulate results. A voting system's RCV capability is dependent upon three things. One, the configuration of the hardware, firmware, and software, which may vary by vendor. Two, when the system was purchased or leased. And three, if the firmware and software upgrades have been performed since purchase or lease. Another term that comes up as we consider a system's capability is cast vote record, or CVR. When we look at specific voting systems, some will not have built-in RCV tabulation. This doesn't mean RCV is not possible. We just have to determine if the system is able to generate data or ballot images of the votes cast. If we can extract these anonymous, secure records, then a third-party software or application can be used to tabulate RCV contests. We have also categorized voting system capability as RCV capable, not RCV ready, and not RCV capable. We have defined an RCV capable voting system as having built-in tabulation or the ability to generate cast vote records or ballot images that can be exported to third-party software or applications to tabulate RCV contests. Such systems also have software capable of RCV ballot design. The next category, not RCV ready, means updates to firmware and/or software are necessary to produce CVR data and/or create RCV ballots. Once updates are installed, the system becomes RCV capable. A system that is not RCV capable is one that cannot be modified or upgraded to produce an RCV ballot design and/or cannot generate CVR data. A jurisdiction with this type of voting system may adopt RCV as a voting method, but would have to manually count the ballots. Jurisdiction capability with this configuration is largely a function of the complexity of the election, and aspects such as the number of voters in the jurisdictions or perhaps the number of ballot contests may be deciding factors. My colleague, George Gilbert, will now guide us through actual voting systems and their capabilities.
Thank you, Karen. And we can now start to look at individual voting systems and their capabilities. But first, I need to preface my remarks with a disclaimer. That is, the information here comes without a warranty. We've done our best to collect accurate information, but you should certainly verify your system capabilities with your own vendor. The voting system market in the United States at this time is really held primarily by 4 vendors. They are Unison Voting, Hart InterCivic, Election Systems and Software, or ES&S, and Dominion Voting. We have developed a table which breaks down our findings on the RCV capabilities, as Karen has outlined them, for each of these vendors' systems. We'll take a look at this table briefly and then give a summary of each vendor's RCV capability. We'll also look at 2 other vendors in the industry and some of the innovation that's taking place. Because of the volume of information in these tables, it's difficult to show this material in detail in this particular format. We've included the tables as a handout, which you can retrieve from the handout tab, or you may view it on our website, rankchoicevoting.org. For now, I will try to summarize the types of information the tables contain to assist you in your follow-up regarding your specific voting system. As you will recall from a previous slide, we discussed RCV capability involves software, hardware, and firmware. So this table first compiles the key information on the software for each system, including the vendor's latest software, as well as previous software versions that many jurisdictions still use. One of the columns here outlines the type of ballot design the software is able to provide. In the previous webinar, the Center for Civic Design depicted these designs and gave recommendations based on phase 1 of the usability study. And let's review these designs briefly for those who missed the earlier webinar. Participants in the usability study voted on mock ballots that were optical scan columns with 3 or 6 rankings, voted on grid style ballots, on those where the ranking is hand entered, or on a newspaper style ballot. The study basically found participants were comfortable with all designs except the newspaper style. We point to these designs because jurisdictions may well have design limitations depending on the voting system software or hardware. And these are among the key factors that we assess if a system is considered RCV capable or not. We have also compiled information in these tables on the hardware supported by the largest vendors. Again, this portion of the table is hard to view as a single slide, and you will want to review it in the handouts, particularly focusing obviously on your own voting system or voting systems that you're considering. For now, I'd like to just summarize what type of information the table contains. It contains the voting system equipment currently supported by each vendor, the type of equipment, whether it's DRE or optical scan, which software works with each type of equipment, whether the hardware is compatible with built-in RCV tabulation. Does it have a built-in RCV tabulation component? And also if there are exportable cast vote records for RCV tabulation with third-party software. There's a notes column in each of these tables that may provide additional information of interest. Now let's take the software and hardware information and examine each of these vendors individually. We have listed Unison voting first, and if you've been wondering why, that's because Unison was actually the first vendor among the current vendors to have built-in RCV capability. From there, we just went in reverse alphabetical order, and the ordering shows no preference for vendors from our perspective. Unison provides built-in RCV tabulation through its OpenElect system, which includes the OpenElect software and voting equipment models, which are the OpenElect OVO optical scanner and the OVCS high-speed scanner. Their OpenElect 1.1 was the first system with native RCV capability that was certified by the EAC. This occurred in January of 2010. Their current versions, 1.3, is the most recent EAC certified voting system for Unison and also has native RCV capability. OpenElect system allows up to 3 RCV rankings using the grid style ballot. Next, we'll look at ES&S. ES&S does not currently offer built-in RCV tabulation. However, the company's latest voting system can generate cast vote records for third-party tabulation. I would also note that ES&S has, over the years, worked with a number of jurisdictions in preparing, testing, and executing third-party RCV tabulation. So they have been open and willing to this and have their system specifically designed to carry this out. Their EVS 5.2 and 5.4 software can be used to design RCV ballots in column or grid formats, and the cast vote files can be exported for third-party tabulation. Both of these are EAC certified, but there are no specific RCV functionalities to be tested. An earlier software version, the EVS 5.1, is not EAC certified and can only produce a column-style RCV ballot. The cast vote record data for export is available with that version. ES&S has recently submitted for approval to the EAC for testing their 6.2 version software, which includes RCV ballot formatting, for both grid and column style and for cast vote record export. ES&S's previous election management software, Unity, can be used to design column style RCV ballots, as we did in North Carolina and is done in several other jurisdictions today. The RCV capability of ES&S voting equipment is obviously dependent on the firmware and software versions used by each individual jurisdiction. The DS200 and 850 are compatible with EVS or Unity software. The RCV capability of these models is dependent on the capability of the software and the firmware being used with them. The DS450, Express Vote, and the Express Touch hardware are compatible with EVS version software, which provides RCV capability depending on exactly which EVS version you're using. The legacy hardware, the Ibotronic, the M100, or the M650, is compatible with the Unity software only. And of these models, only the Ibotronic actually produces a cast vote record data. Also, I would mention that the electronic interface systems are limited at this time to the column format for ballot layout. Dominion voting now offers a built-in RCV tabulation through an additional module to its Democracy Suite software using the ImageCast voting equipment. The Democracy Suite is EAC certified. However, the RCV module is currently not certified by the Commission. The company has indicated the ability to rank up to 10 candidates with this module. The older AccuVote models, the ACVC Advantage, the AVC Edge, and Optech models are capable of generating cast vote record data using the column-style RCV ballots, and these can be used with third-party RCV tabulation. Two other vendors.
George, I'm going to slide back. We skipped over HART.
Where's HART?
Between Unison and ES&S. So on the.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to mute myself again.
Thank you. HART's InterCivic. Yes, I didn't stay in alphabetical order, did I? HART now has the Verity software, and their software is compatible with internal RCV tabulation. It is also EAC certified as of April 2016. You have the Central High-Speed Scanner, the Verity Precinct Optical Scanner, and the Verity Touch DRE. Version 2.0 software allows voters to rank up to 6 candidates. The previous version of Verity 1.0 was limited to 5 RCV rankings. HART InterCivic's previous voting system, the HVS software with compatible voting equipment, the Ballot Now high-speed scanner, the eScan, or the eSlate DRE, do have built-in RCV, does not have RCV tabulation. However, the ballots can be designed for these systems with the HVS software, and cast vote record files can be extracted from the voting equipment for tabulation by third-party systems. Now, getting back on track here, we have two other vendors that we would like to discuss briefly that are providing voting systems in U.S. jurisdictions. These include Clear Ballot and Microvote. The Clear Ballot system is capable of generating exportable data for third-party RCV tabulation. However, the company would prefer to develop an end-to-end, in-the-box RCV process with a partner jurisdiction. So if you are using Clear Ballot or plan to use Clear Ballot, that company is prepared to work with you to develop native RCV capability within that system. Microvote currently does not have any built-in RCV tabulation option, but they have expressed willingness to work with their customers to develop that capability should it be needed. Innovation in the voting systems arena is ongoing. From the largest voting equipment vendors to graduate students working on their thesis projects. Efforts to improve and enhance the voting equipment with the latest technology, or to incorporate additional voting methods such as ranked choice voting, are in development across the board. The Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center has worked in collaboration with several entities of these projects, and several RCV jurisdictions have contracted for assistance of third-party vendors for their tabulation. With regard to third-party tabulation, MK Election Services and TrueBallot have used computer applications to tabulate RCV results with cast vote records generated by systems in jurisdictions such as Cambridge, Massachusetts, Tacoma Park, Maryland, and Portland, Maine, among others. Other groups are working on voting innovation that offer options for ranked choice voting, and these include Bright Spots, which is a cutting-edge group based out of San Francisco that seeks to use technology to promote better democracy. This group, which includes a number of veterans of the tech industry, is helping the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center to develop an RCV tabulator that is projected to go through federal testing and will be designed to use cast vote record data exported from any capable voting system in order to tabulate ranked choice voting results. We have learned about the work of OpaVote, which offers online election administration for multiple voting systems, including ranked choice voting. The company's Counts system provides results for ranked choice ballots collected from paper ballots or from other electronic voting systems. Votes is another innovative group, that's VOATZ, that we've learned about and had conversations with. They provide a mobile voting platform with RCV capability, and they are using biometrics and blockchain for security, auditability, and voter anonymity. Efforts by all of these groups and the voting system vendors are making ranked choice voting more available voting method for jurisdictions across the country. We will be happy to work with you and your jurisdiction to determine the capability of your particular voting system and the options for implementing ranked choice voting. At this point, I will turn you back over to Mr. Gary Bartlett.
Thanks, George. We have covered a lot of information and have tried to give an overview of where voting systems are with regards to RCV implementation. Now let's take a few minutes to cement all of it together and consider suggestions for implementing RCV. First and foremost, know all variations of voting systems that are RCV capable and meets the needs of your jurisdiction. Along with that, we can also say that if multiple jurisdictions are involved, the best scenario is having either uniform systems statewide or multi-voting systems manufactured by a single vendor. The jurisdictions capable of RCV tabulation, but we have to recognize that the variables such as funding and a state's laws can make one or both of these scenarios infeasible. As states and jurisdictions consider purchase of future voting systems or implementing of ranked choice voting, there are additional items to consider. For those advocating for RCV or writing legislation regarding RCV, be flexible in your specifications. As you can see, the voting system vendors and innovators in the field are making progress. As new technology comes on the scene, aspects such as ballot design, number of rankings, and tabulation procedures will improve. Be future thinking and do not limit your jurisdiction's implementation options or require amendments down the road. Until an RCV-capable voting system is purchased, limit rounds of counting. This simplifies administration, tabulation, and auditing. For example, limit the RCV runoff to the top 2 candidates as done in North Carolina in 2010. This requires only 1 additional round of tabulation. For states without RCV-capable voting systems, initial steps might be to implement only vacancy or municipal elections. Jurisdictions adopting RCV may need to choose between a combined non-RCV and RCV ballot or separate ballots for each type of election. Where feasible, the voter as well as the administrative fees, a combined ballot is recommended. Ballot usability, design, layout, and instructions are key facets with RCV as with any election. Voter education resources vary and unfortunately do not always reach those needing guidance. A best practice is for a polling place official to provide oral and or written instructions when the voter presents themselves at the start of the voting process. In this 2-day webinar blitz, we're also learning about the findings from the first phase of the usability study conducted by the Center for Civic Design in partnership with Fair Vote and Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. The previous webinar provided additional guidance on ballot design and instructions that came from the study. Work with your voting system vendor to incorporate the best practices in your jurisdiction's administration of RCV. Without a doubt, the hurdles jurisdictions have faced with RCV, the laborious task of hand counting, and the time required to tally and certify, they have been erased. RCV has benefited from many advancements in voting systems and innovation in the industry, and will allow for more jurisdictions to adopt and implement this voting method. The future of voting systems RCV capability is bright. Now I would like to turn it back to our moderator, Beverly.
Thank you, Gary. Today's presentation has been recorded, and we will hold a brief question and answer session in a few moments. Due to time limitations, we may be able to take only a couple of questions, but as I stated before, the questions will be documented and emailed to all attendees, and the answers will be posted next week to the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center's website. Our 2-day webinar blitz will continue tomorrow at 1 p.m. when the Center for Civic Design will share their usability study findings about voter education, particularly voter guides, and some information on presenting ranked choice voting election results. And stay tuned as we have many other webinars planned for the remainder of the year. Alerts will be sent by email. We thank you for joining us today. And now let's look and see if we have a couple of questions that we can address before the end of our webinar. And I do have one, and I'm going to toss this one to George. George, the question is, how does built-in ranked choice voting tabulation work across multiple voting machines or polls? For single machines to perform the tabulation, it would need to see the cast vote records from all other machines. Can you address how it works, George, across multiple voting systems?
Well, if it was across multiple voting systems, you would have to have a tabulation system that had a common data format for the cast vote records. That's something that the VVSG is working toward, and in the future, all voting systems will be required to export their data in a common data format. Currently, we do not have that, so if you've got multiple voting systems in a jurisdiction or statewide, you would have to do data conversion. You would also have to have that cast vote record uploaded to the central tabulation system in order for that system to be able to do the tabulation using all of the cast vote records. As Gary mentioned, starting out using ranked choice voting in municipal elections or local elections is often a good option. But if you do have a statewide election requirement, then yes, the cast vote record does need to be uploaded to the central tabulation station, wherever that may be at the state level, in order for that tabulation to take place.
Okay. Thank you, George.
Beverly, I need to make an announcement that Chris has shared, a technical announcement for everyone before we go to the next question. Apparently, the handout for the compatibility table has an issue, or is one of our charts that just shows a single vendor and was loaded by mistake. So Chris has made an updated or a complete table document available in the questions tab so that our attendees can access that. The table is also in the implementing with multiple jurisdictions document and the model implementation plan as an appendix to those two documents. So hopefully you can access that, and we'll also make sure to include it when we do email out the questions and the recording. Sorry, thanks, Beverly.
That's all right. Thank you, Karen, for that information. And I have one final question that I will ask, and I'm going to ask Gary if he would respond to this. And I think this question may be something that has broad interest across our audience. Would you please address the issue of how to make sure post-election audits in ranked choice voting elections are effective and transparent? As transparent as possible, especially in view of the recent allegations of attempts to subvert the presidential elections process, and to what extent do vendors currently meet this need? Gary, could you address that, please?
I am going to provide a general answer, and then I am going to ask George to follow up, because this is something that George has been working on very diligent. He has been working in cooperation with those around the United States and with Ron Revest of the VVSG, who chairs the committee which are looking at these standards for ranked choice voting. And there are two different methods that are looking for audibility. And I do not have enough background to provide information, except it will be provided on the questions along with whatever George shares with us. But let me give you an example of what we did in North Carolina. What we did was we had an independent statistician from the University of North Carolina to determine across North Carolina, which has 100 counties, how many precincts, early voting sites, and absentee mail counties needed to be hand-to-eye counted for accuracy of machine count. And that formula usually came out to either 2 or 3 counties, sometimes 4. There would be about 3 or 4 precincts, early voting sites, or mail-in ballots for a hand count. And that would be given to the county the day after the election, and it was part of our canvass process. And we got pretty good at it, and it worked very well. What you would do is you would have everyone there get the hand count done, compare it with the machine count. If there needed to be anything that needed to be reconciled, we would try to resolve the issues. Mainly the issues that we saw during this Audibility are marking issues by the voter with optical scan mark sense ballot, where they did not mark the target area as they should, or it was so light that the machine could not read it. Now, George, can you share about the different methods being considered? I believe one of them is the Bayesian.
Yes. There are several efforts, and there's quite a bit of work going on in the academic communities around the country regarding the best methods for auditing ranked choice voting elections. The two primary methods that are being looked at are Bayesian audits, a system which has been developed, is being developed and described by Ron Rivest, whom you mentioned, at MIT. They have also looked at risk limiting audits, and there are a number of people that are working on that. The key there is getting all of the data securely transmitted. For instance, let's say you have a statewide election. As mentioned a moment ago, you have to transmit or transport all of the cast vote records to a central location in order to execute the final tabulation. Likewise, the final audit would likely need to take place at that same level. If you use cryptographic hashing, that data can be transmitted electronically and securely and very rapidly. So once you've got the secure data there, most of the vendors today are coming out with very efficient auditing systems built into their voting systems. So I think that looking to the future, we're going to have much better auditing systems than we have had in the past, where we have had to strictly deal with managing a lot of paper. But even as Gary pointed out, just for normal auditing purposes, just using a very open and transparent audit process, I think, is the key to that. And as we await, sort of at this point, the academics are churning through their various methodologies, and I think they will have something ready for us to use within the next year or two.
The only thing that I'd like to add to that, George, is make every part of the process open to the public so that they can witness it.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you both for your responses on that. As I mentioned earlier, our questions, the ones that we did not have the opportunity to address today, will be posted along with the webinar. I would like to thank our presenters today, Gary, Karen, and George, for sharing your insights on voting systems capabilities. And I remind you again, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, the Center for Civic Design will present the third in our webinar Blitz topic on voter education and voter guides and some of their findings from their usability studies. So please plan to join us then. And again, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have a good afternoon. Thank you.